Um, Good evening. I thought it might be good afternoon when I spoke, but I'm told I'm on Latin time, I think. We have a similar thing in Houston. I think I need to explain a little bit my history in terms of education and how that history influences a little bit of how I manage various projects that we get involved with. I was educated in Virginia in the United States, and the institution was in the Blue Ridge Mountains, so a bit of a environmental edge condition with very little habitation surrounding the university, so we were quite isolated. The curriculum was based off of various tenements coming from educators who had come from the Bauhaus School in Germany and also the Ohm School, and the relationship to making was very, very forward. And the interest in expanding on one's consciousness through looking at the relationship of the totality of the person's being, which was inclusive of the totality of the senses. So it was at one point extremely sensual in terms of the pursuit, but also augmented by the nonsensical. We had a heavy basis in Western philosophy, and the primary critiques that came from the faculty were grounded in these philosophical reflections, none of which I had a real grounding on. So my fourth year, I decided to drop out of architecture and just take philosophy and psychology classes. And the repercussions of that were that I was somewhat more comfortable with going back into the program, which was on one hand quite capable of handling persons who were mapping their trajectory in a very conventional way, where upon the graduation they would move to a city, join an architecture company and pursue their licensure and eventually get it and maybe start a company and or move up in the company that they were in. There was also in the college what we called the inner college, which was a kind of island for misfits who really didn't follow through with convention, and I think I fell into that group. We were, as I've seen some terms thrown up, I think tinkerers. We were persons that like to hack into things, we like to disrupt things, we like to associate ourselves with persons who were not swimming with the flow, let's say. We had an art department that was also cooperating with persons who were running against the grain. We got involved with John Cage, we got involved with people like Kathy Acker, so underground figures who were pushing a little bit against the norm. And during my interest in pursuing philosophy, we primarily focused on existentialism and phenomenology, and I really dug deep into Hegel, and especially like Hegel's relationship to dichotomous thinking and the use of dialectics, and especially like the slippery discussions about it's not really about existing at the two ends, but finding your way within the interior. So the projects I'm going to show you, some of which do relate to the research into translucent concrete, although I would say that it's not a research into that particular phrasing in terms of the semantic and syntactic shuffle of the two words. It's more about existing between the realm of transparency and opacity and looking at the potentials of translucency as a research condition that is birthed through the interest of having this various opportunity to push in this center point. So, let's see. The first project I show is a invitation that was given to us to produce a hypothetical project for the National Building Museum's expose on concrete. They had heard about the research that I was doing and the circumstances whereby which the hearing of the research were quite maybe conventional in some ways. We were working within a university setting, and an unscrupulous British reporter happened to pin down one of my research assistants while I was at OMA. At that time, I was working at OMA, had been for about 4.5 years, and was teaching in the United States for 1 week and then flying back to the Netherlands to work in the office there at OMA. And one of the trips where I was working in the Netherlands, the reporter had kind of cornered this research assistant and said that I had said it was okay to release various data on the research as well as imagery. So at that point, the kind of internet blew up with excessive discussion about the topic, and at that point, I decided to let the research go and treated it as a kind of desire-driven direction, which its purpose was not to produce translucent concrete panels or translucent concrete formulas which were for profit. So there were various projects lobbied towards us, one of which was this one, which I really became interested in because of its relationship to experimentation. We were given a chance to create this hypothetical project, and in that, I pursued the relationship of the research in terms of looking at the atomization of translucency across a field condition. I was very interested also at that time in Kandinsky's work, specifically Kandinsky's double-sided paintings, and was a bit enthralled with the idea that the panel could have this dual identity, one which was completely governed by a relationship to Cartesian positions, and then the other side which was completely related to a kind of non-existence and alliance with predictability. So we produced a technique which allowed for the idea to be executed, and this was the result. Again, I'm very interested in the suspension of anticipation in a way. With this project, it was a competition which we won to design a stadium within a stadium for the Jamsil Design Biennale in Korea. We, again, looked at the relationship of the program interest and feasibility and the ability to execute something which could hold 1,500 people for the opening, where the president would come and open up the event. This one, we had worked with a manufacturer that had helped OMA do their pavilion in the Serpentine Gallery. That company had come on board. We decided to move forward with the contract, and that company backed out 2 weeks prior to the execution of the project. I had a friend in Korea, Min-Suk Cho from Mass Studies, who had done some work with inflatables, and we had struck up the conversation about my need to identify a manufacturer for that. So he said he thought the company he worked with could do it. We went and had everything ready for these people in terms of surfaces that had been unfolded and the patterns for the surfaces to be cut and everything. And they said they didn't want to use that. They just wanted to build a clay model and wrap the clay model in a silicone, then take that silicone off and cut it. And then they produced the patterns for that. We were quite shocked. We went up to their facility and we were asked to have a barbecue and drink whiskey till 1 a.m. before they agreed to work with us. So I guess after drinking till those hours, they enjoyed us and we set up the contract and executed it. They had maybe like 20 seamstresses in a shed producing this stuff in a matter of 2 days. This inflatable is the length of a football field, so it's quite massive. It has a printed, perforated pattern on a translucent skin, so we mapped the architecture of the exposure of the skin to the sun and created a basically a parametric model to deal with the thermal loading on the thing, and created a presence from the outside where it looks opaque. When you get inside, it was translucent and almost intestinal. This is another project using the concrete research. This was for mass studies, working with Min-Suk Cho on the boutique where he was focusing on the thematic of skin. So we started looking at the webbing in the hand and trying to create some relationship to the epidermal. And this is another project, which was a competition win for a garden project in Chaumont, France. Here we use translucent concrete here. We use a product that a colleague of mine has developed, which is a lightweight concrete skin or a cement skin. This is maybe influential in terms of, I was invited by Ai Weiwei to do a project in Ordos. It has more to do with maybe another project that Ai Weiwei had an influence on. Let's see, I'll flick through this one. This is a project which was a project discussed with Ai Weiwei. He had seen some of my work after he had invited me to participate in the Ordos 100 project, and we got to discussing the project and collaborating on this, recognizing that there's a kind of pandemic problem with regards to waste in the bottle, and producing a upcycled product from this, which he called Reboot, which is the production of stool. And it also is a wall system, and it metastasizes. It basically becomes whatever you want it to become. This project, I think, is rather important. This one works with the interest in translucency and overlay and embedment. We're looking at upcycling. This was a reaction to going to Thailand and looking at the first responder activity to the tsunami's fallout. We started looking at one-way trash. In this case, we discovered pallet graveyards, other graveyards that were completely, I guess, without intent of becoming waste in terms of people who were shipping things, but with these type of situations, the kind of overrun of generosity produces problems in and unto itself. So we started to look at the potential to embed strategies into the production of a pallet. We looked at the kind of ontology of the pallet in terms of the slave plate and feet, and then ultimately a serviceable pallet. With embedment strategies, we started to look at the deformation of the pallet and its capacity to offer the opportunity for persons to use it in a different way than it might have originally been intended, therefore kind of releasing it from its servitude to moving into a grave. Capacities for handling the distribution of water, table, shelter, walls. And I'd like to thank the various sponsors, Wholesome, the hotel we're in, Hotel El Presidente, Robert and Fab Lab, Oliver and Mariah, and the students from Prairie View A&M University that came with us. We've been working with Oliver and the generosity of Robert's various comminglings to help us support looking at water bottles here and what we can do with those for a project that Oliver and Mariah showed. Thank you very much.